Hey. Hi, everyone. This is Holly Duke. I am with the Ron Brown Scholar Program and the Ron Brown Leaders Network. Thanks for tuning in to our conversation about edupreneurship and new ideas in education. I'm really excited to have our guest expert here today, Darryl Cobb with the Charter School Growth Fund, and he is being interviewed by someone I've known for 5 years. It's hard to believe that, but Ray Pryor, who's a Ron Brown scholar and a teacher in Memphis. So they're going to have a great conversation, starting with some questions that we've come up with in advance. And then if there are people on the line tonight who would like to ask some questions at the end, we'll have audience questions at the end. But first, before I kick it over to you, Ray, I'm going to do some quick introductions. So Darryl Cobb, who you can see here on the screen, is a partner with the Charter School Growth Fund. So he makes strategic investments in charter school networks located across the country through their Emerging CMO Fund. And then prior to joining the fund, Darryl was the CEO of a turnaround charter school in Chicago. So he also previously served as the Chief Learning Officer at the KIPP Foundation, where he led a portfolio of learning programs, including principal and teacher leader development. And then before KIPP, Darryl worked as a management consultant at Accenture and Diamond Cluster. So he's a graduate of University of Virginia. He has an MBA from Kellogg at Northwestern. He was a Pahara-Aspen fellow and Broad resident, and serves on the board of the Surge Institute, the Illinois network of charter schools, and the Black Alliance for Educational Options. And Darryl lives in Chicago with his wife and 2 kids. Welcome, Darryl.
Thank you. Thank you.
And our interviewer is Ray Pryor, who is there on the left. Ray is a Ron Brown scholar who graduated from Duke in 2019 with a degree in public policy. He taught 9th grade English at the Sunflower County Freedom Project in Sunflower, Mississippi, which is the best town name I've ever heard in my life. He returned as a data analyst and a teacher coach there. And he was also an 8th grade after school instructor at Student U, which is in Durham, North Carolina. He was also a Hillard Jenkins Fellow at Frontline Solutions and an Accelerate Fellow at Teach for America. So Ray has a passion for education, particularly for educating boys and young men of color, which is rooted in his own experiences in Project Green Street and his own work with students in college, which drove him to pursue his career as an educator. Ray currently teaches middle school math at Grizzlies Prep, an all-boys charter school in Memphis, Tennessee. Welcome, Ray.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. And I'm gonna pass the baton to you now to greet Darryl and get kicked off with our first question of the night.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Duke, for the introduction, and welcome to everybody who's joining, and welcome Mr. Cobb to part of the RBS family. I've been super excited for this conversation, just to learn Cobb, but also obviously being passionate about education, but also now being a teacher, especially a teacher at a charter school. I think it'll be a good conversation for us to have about the landscape, some things that we can be looking forward to. So super excited to kick it off. Just to start out, Mr. Cobb, do you mind? I mean, we heard your bio, but do you have anything else that you wanted to share about your background or what you do now, or kind of how you got to where you are?
Yeah, I'll share a couple of quick things, but please just call me Darryl.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah. Please call me Darryl. A couple of things, and thank you, Holly, and thank you to the Ron Brown family for allowing me to spend some time with you guys. I'm a big fan of all that Ron Brown does, and Mike Mallory was the admissions officer at UVA who let me in back in the day. So my love for Mike runs deep, and I'm on one of the advisory boards of Ron Brown. So a big fan of the work. A couple things I want to add to the bio that Holly did is I had for those who are wondering, I had a kind of a circuitous path to education. I actually came out of UVA as an engineer, was an electrical engineering major, and then did systems work for Accenture and others for a number of years after undergrad, and then went Kellogg, got my MBA, came out and did more management consulting. My path to education really for me started when my wife and I moved to the south side of Chicago. We found a place that we loved in a neighborhood that we loved. And it kind of slowly began to dawn on me that as I woke up and went to work every morning, and I was probably one of those odd people who enjoyed the consulting lifestyle and to work on different projects. But I would leave on Monday morning, come back on Thursday. And what was clear is no matter how good the work was that I did, it didn't affect the community that I lived in. It didn't affect anybody on my block. You know, my bank account was probably getting bigger at a quicker rate then than it is now. But that was not enough. And so I jumped kind of almost blindly into education because I knew I wanted to go somewhere and make a difference. And I was fortunate enough at that time to get hooked up with this startup charter organization called KIPP. So many of you may have heard of KIPP now, which has kind of brand name recognition. I think they have 150 schools around the country. At the time I joined them, they only had 5. And believe it or not, I thought, oh wow, they're crazy enough to let this business guy into education. I'll start here and then I'll go get a real education job somewhere after that. But lasted at KIPP for 6 years and have deep love for that organization and all the work that they do. Nothing in this world prepared me for the time I had as a school leader and as the CEO of a turnaround charter school on the west side of Chicago. Still the hardest work that I have ever done in my life, the most rewarding work, and frankly, the most kind of traumatizing work I've ever done in my life, working with young people who were living in a great community that had fallen on hard times. So that work for me will forever be the highlight of my career, and frankly also some of the biggest disappointments in my career stood in that time. My current work at the Growth Fund, I've been here about 9.5 years now as a partner, and I love this work. And at the end of the day, I get to fly around the country and help ensure that kids who look like me and other Black and brown kids across this country have access to a high quality education. And that's kind of what I wake up to do every morning. I get lots of people asking, what do I want to do next? And I always say, what I want to do next is exactly what I'm doing right now. Because to be able to support people at schools, Ray, like yours, I know Grizzlies Prep. I've actually been in that building. Support the work that people are doing like that is a dream. And so I wake up thrilled to do this work all the time.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear. I'm glad you stopped by Grizzlies Prep too. I saw that the fund supports some schools in Memphis, and so I was curious.
Yeah.
The Grizzlies Prep and know about that. So that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, yeah, no, that's great to hear a little bit about you know, how you got to where you are. And I think it's great to not only hear people hear about the work that you do in education, but also how you can end up there in a bunch of different ways. There's a bunch of ways to get to this work that obviously I think is the most important stuff you can do. Do you mind just elaborating a little bit more on what is the Charter School Growth Fund? You know, maybe the mission, and specifically, how do you, you know, when you're talking about ensuring high quality education for kids to look like us, how do you guys measure that impact or those results?
Yeah, so our mission is really simple. We want to scale the highest performing charter schools across the country. There's lots of studies out there about, you know, do charters work? Do traditional public schools work? Does this educational form work? Does that one work? You can debate all kind of day and night what you know, what you think is right and which one should win. The shorter answer is we don't have enough of any of them that are good when we're talking about the education of our kids. And so we have said, hey, where there are high performing charter schools, we want to help them scale and serve more students. In particular, those schools that are serving Black and brown youth, especially those in underserved communities. So that's our mission, and that's what we wake up fired up to do every day. Structurally, I think sometimes people are confused when they hear Charter School Growth Fund because we are a nonprofit. We are set up very much like a for-profit equity fund who goes out and invests money in businesses. We're set up the same way, except we're a nonprofit, and the money that we're quote unquote investing is in schools to help them grow to serve more students. So we go out and raise money from foundations and high net worth individuals that they are interested in. This is their philanthropic dollars that we're raising, so they're not looking for a financial return, but this is a philanthropic endeavor. And as a nonprofit, we pull together those funds, and then we go out and find great charter schools across the country. And if it's somebody who has 1 or 2 schools, we're the vehicle that may help them get to 3 or 4. If you have 3 or 4, we may be the vehicle that helps you get to 10. And if you're at 10, we're the vehicle that helps you get to 20 or 25 to serve more kids and provide a great education. We currently work with probably about 100 charter organizations across the country that operate about 1,000 charter schools. About half of those organizations have 3 or fewer schools. About half of them are larger. We work with everybody from those who just have 1 school serving 350 to 500 kids to the largest network that we work with. I believe they are up to maybe 35 or 40,000 kids served now across their charter network. So they're as big as some medium school districts in medium-sized cities. Work with kind of everybody in between that. And for us, as we think about what our return is, ultimately what matters is the success of our young people that are attending the schools that we're serving. So how are young people doing across a number of different measures? How are young people doing on standardized tests? How are young people doing self-reported on the culture and climate and what they're feeling they're gaining by being in their particular school? How are young people doing on getting into college? How are young people doing on staying in college? How are young people doing on finding first jobs after college? These are many of the success metrics that we have and the things that we look at and the things that we care about. We also care about our organizations growing, and as they're growing, are they not only serving more kids, but are they serving them better than they did when they had fewer resources? Right. So that's something really, really important to us when we're looking to make an investment in an organization. We're looking at 4 primary things that we want to see before we invest, and we want to see grow and get better. And that's, we're looking for great leadership. We're looking for strong academic outcomes for, in particular, kids of color. We serve about, the networks that we support serve about 450,000 kids across the country. About 91% of those are kids of color, and about 2% of them are in economically disadvantaged areas or on the federal free and reduced lunch program, which is a poverty measure. So we're looking for people who serve students in that population, but are achieving outsized results with those students. We're looking for people who have a growth plan and a vision for having more schools than they currently have and how they want to do that. And then finally, we're looking for organizations that are financially sustainable. We know that organizations may need our philanthropy to help them grow, but ultimately organizations will need to operate on the public funding that they're provided from their state and local governments. And so we want to know that after our investment's over, the organization isn't going to falter, but yet it's going to continue on for generations to serve kids.
All right. I appreciate you sharing about that, Darryl. Sounds like I really appreciate it. I think especially as a teacher that obviously academic outcomes matter a lot to me, but that I think especially in the charter schools space, it probably gets a rep that all that we kind of care about is test scores and
it does
things. But the fact that you're talking about, self-reported, how do the kids feel in the school? How are they doing once they leave, which is huge. I feel like you guys take a really good comprehensive look at the schools that you support. So that's exciting to hear. I really like the title of this call, Entrepreneurship. Obviously, education is a space that it's an industry that's existed, you know, however long humanity has been here, but it's also a space that people are doing new and creative things.
Yeah.
I was wondering if in the portfolio that you have for the fund, are there any, I guess, like new ideas or form or, you know, platforms,
Yeah.
especially me, like, you know, tomorrow, are there new ways that I can set up my math classroom? What
Right.
has got you guys excited for what the work that the schools do?
Yeah, there are, it's such a great question. And we very much look at our business as we're investing in entrepreneurs who want to grow great networks. For us, that entrepreneurial mindset, even though we recognize people are school leaders, that entrepreneurial mindset is essential in order for an organization to grow, and the growth mindset that has to be part of that process. I could literally spend the next 2 hours talking about the things around the country that I see that make me the most excited. But I'll pick a couple out and then I'll share. And then if there are questions about others, happy to dive in. About 6 years ago, 7 years ago now, we at the Growth Fund started an initiative that we called our Emerging CMO Fund. And that fund was specifically set up to fund schools that were led by Black and Brown people serving Black and Brown kids. We noticed an underrepresentation in philanthropy of dollars going to schools that were led by people who were from or representative of the community that the kids serve. And we said that's not the way it should be. And so over the last 7 years, we've probably invested almost $20 million in schools that are led by Black and Brown folks, creating great education for Black and Brown folks. And in that set of organizations are some of the most impressive educators I've been around and doing some of the most amazing things that I've seen. There is a school in Arizona that was started by actually a non-educator, a parent who was a television news reporter. It's the Arizona Autism School, and she had an autistic son and realized that as she moved from school to school, there wasn't the right home providing the right education for her child, who she knew and believed was brilliant, despite what all the tests and everybody said and the conditions and labels that were to be put there. And she opened a school specifically focused on serving kids who have autism, as well as general education kids. And when you walk into this school, the bonds you see between gen ed kids and kids with autism, and the love and care you see that is happening for kids with autism, and the patience of the teachers and the multiple modalities that the teachers have to bring to the classroom to reach the students, right? When you walk out, it just feels incredibly special, and you knew that you just witnessed something that you don't see every day.
Right.
A second school that we work with in Albuquerque, it's a school that focuses on serving kids who are from indigenous native populations of students, but living in the big city of Albuquerque and often disconnected from that part of their heritage. And I've had the chance to make multiple visits to the school and spend time there. And when you see, when I was there, they had just a 6th through 12th grade. They now go fully K through 12 after our investment. But when you see young 6th graders who were not proud of the fact that they are Native American and that their families are Native American, and they shy away from that, and they come and experience a curriculum at the school where in 6th and 7th grade, their entire ELA curricula are focused on Native authors. And so the kids begin to see themselves and hear themselves. Their world history curriculum looks at schools from the lens, looks at world history, not from the lens of who won and who conquered, but who was indigenous to that land at that time and what did those folks experience.
Right.
Get to high school, they can take all of the languages that all of us, the German, the French, the Spanish, if they want, or you can take Lakota, Navajo, or Series to connect with your roots. And then you see these young people at 12th grade, on the campus of University of New Mexico, kind of dual enrolled, taking college courses, and then going off to great schools and majoring in Native studies and starting Native clubs on their college campuses, right? Those are the kind of things that when I see it, I say, how how can we not do more to have more kids access an education that looks like this?
Yeah.
Again, you can tell I'm getting excited. My hands are moving around.
Me too. Me too. Yeah.
I could go on and on. Some of the great schools we see that use technology in incredible ways to reach kids. The schools that we work with that focus on kids who are overage and undercredited. So these are the kids who the system has kind of turned their back on, but yet they're going to welcome them with open arms and find different pathways for them to achieve what they achieve. I've seen some of the most beautiful dual language schools where you'll go to the school in the morning and you'll go into a first grade classroom and they're teaching in Spanish. And so you'll have students who are native Spanish speakers helping the native English speakers. And then you go back to that same classroom in the afternoon and they're teaching in English. And that same kid who was getting tutored in the morning is now tutoring the Spanish speaking student on what's happening, right? And so there are so many schools out there that are doing incredible things. I just feel fortunate that we're an organization who can help them do more and reach more kids.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. Awesome to hear some of those stories. I had the opportunity to visit Albuquerque and learn a little bit about the landscape there in New Mexico a couple of years ago. And the powerful things that I watched the native educators do with their kids made me as a Black educator jealous. And like, I need to step my game in terms of making sure my kids see themselves in their curriculum. So not only is it powerful to hear about, it's also something that, you know, other communities can learn from.
Absolutely.
Schools. And so that especially hit me because I remember hearing about that. They're doing great work there. So yeah, that's exciting to hear that you get to see and support those. I think this is a cool. Next question is obviously for the folks who are with us or are going to watch this. You know, Ron Brown especially, obviously one of, you know, Ron Brown's passions is education. Everybody at the staff in the office and everybody who's a part of it cares about education. But I don't know if it's always something that people know, obviously, besides being in the classroom, know how to get involved or know how to prepare as a space that you want to get into. I think teaching is obviously one way to do it. But do you have any other types of opportunities or leadership development that if we have folks who want to get into education, but maybe they're interested in consulting, or maybe they're interested in business, or maybe they're interested in tech and engineering like you are, what would you recommend if folks, how would you prepare if you were to for a career in education?
Yeah, I mean, I will, I'm going to take your lead. And the first thing I will always say to somebody is the most important thing that is done in education is the magic that happens in a classroom every single day, right? So if you really, really want to understand education, going through an organization like Teach for America or the New Teacher Project, or, you know, a number of cities, there's like a Teach New York or a Teach DC that are specially built for people who are career changers and looking to do something different in the classroom and impact the lives of young people. That's always the first thing out of my mouth. If the classroom isn't for you, then I think there are several other kind of leadership development paths that can be taken. A couple of them, there's the, Holly mentioned in my bio, there's the Broad residency. The Broad Foundation out of Los Angeles has created a residency for people who have corporate experience and then go and get their MBAs but have an interest in education. You kind of end up being placed into an education organization, whether that's a school district or a charter management organization, doing the work of helping that organization better serve the schools, the principals, the teachers, and the students that they're responsible for and interacting with. Is a wonderful, wonderful organization. And they actually just announced a partnership with Yale. So I think now, like, the program is going to be run through the Yale Business School somehow. I'm not sure of all the details, but worth looking up and would highly recommend that. The program that a lot of people who've come to us have done is Education Pioneers. And they have both a summer program that you can do if you're in the process of getting an MBA or a policy degree. You go and spend the summer in an embedded in an education organization and of doing that summer-long internship, and that's been an entry path for a lot of folks. They also have a 10-month kind of, maybe they call them EP, maybe they're just EP fellows. They're like a 10-month fellowship project. And it's usually focused around data. So if you're a data type person, but again, they'll place you for those 10 months into an education organization. And you'll have a great firsthand experience of what that work really looks like. There's the New Teacher Project has a fellowship program. I mean, there's a whole laundry list of fellowship programs. So, you know, there's different ones in different cities. And then I would also say it is now commonplace, where it wasn't when I started in this work back in 2002. It's now commonplace to want MBAs or business folks or folks with other skill sets inside of organizations. So whatever it is that you do, if you're a marketing person, if you're a policy person, if you're a healthcare person, there are school districts and charter management networks and organizations that need your skills to serve the students that they are serving on a day in and day out basis. I'm sitting in the offices right now of one of the KIPP regions. And, you know, as I look out in the office, they have people who are leading marketing because they have to get students to enroll in their school, right? People who are leading, you know, they have a chief operating officer who's making sure that all of the buses run on time, lunches are there, you know, all of the operation stuff. They have a chief finance officer. They have a policy person who works in government relations with all that's going on in education, both locally here, then at the state level and at the federal level. So there's all kind of opportunities for folks, depending on what your skill set is, to come and actually bring that skill set to bear on an education organization that's working to fight for a great education for our kids.
Right. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I appreciate you sharing that. I wanted to make sure that I took notes on some of those things so I can look those up. And I'm really excited that you specifically, Darryl, are here, because I think a lot of the Ron Brown community, obviously all of us are really passionate about social change and education.
Yeah.
And a lot of us have a lot of interest in business and technology, and sometimes struggle to marry the two. And I feel like there are people who will watch this who have the same kind of tension of coming home Thursday after a project to the same block that hasn't changed, you know, even
Right.
though you feel like you're coming up a little bit. And especially, and so I think that's powerful to hear. You know, that, like, obviously if the classroom is for you, obviously we'd love for you to hop on board to do that. But if it's not, there's so many other avenues that you can contribute here and do those exact same things. So to actually hear somebody who's done that and been really successful at it I think it's going to be encouraging just for our network, just knowing our people, which is really cool. Are there any people that you think, and this could be people we should follow on social media, people who we might have already seen, you know, maybe in the news, we just don't really know much about them, who are like the names that we should be watching, or the names that you watch for education related things?
There's so many people who are doing such great work. It's hard to, I saw this slide on what Holly sent us in advance. I made my little list, and then my list just kept getting longer.
Now you gotta add more, right.
Yeah, I won't have time to get everybody in, but I'll just touch on a few different arenas where I see people doing great things. Locally, for me in Chicago, when I think about people who are doing it for kids on a day in and day out basis, my good friend Tim King is, I just have so much respect for that brother. I got to be part of the founding team of Urban Prep Academies, which is a network of high school academies serving African-American boys on the south and west side of Chicago. And for a decade running, they've sent 100% of their boys to college, defeating all of the stories and stereotypes that people want to say. Tim was the visionary behind that and still runs that network today. And just, you know, anything I can do to support him in the work that they're doing, he's incredible. There's a sister in New York named Charlene Reed, who is running a network of school excellence community schools, of schools in the Bronx. And what she's delivering from an educational standpoint for kids in the Bronx is incredible and comparable to what, you know, kids often pay a whole lot of money to get. She's given for free in her charter schools, and her teachers and staff are incredible. But it's not only the education that she's providing to her children, it's that she has embraced that we are part of the Bronx and we are Bronx. And so the way that she has deeply connected and rooted her schools in the communities, from things big to things small, is just, for me, like that is what this work is about. Like that is something that I so deeply admire. One of the people who I owe a lot of my success and understanding in education, Dr. Howard Fuller. He was a former superintendent in Milwaukee, you know, former, you know, activist through, you know, the 60s through the 70s. You know, he's been there with, you know, all the names that we won a lot in the civil rights movement, but he has been unwavering on the ability to create the options for Black parents to choose the school that is right for their kids. And he has fought for that for longer than I've been alive. And I just appreciate him continuing to fight at a level that I wish I could fight on a day in and day out basis, to ensure that Black parents are the ones who have the opportunity and the option to find the best education for their child, whether they have the means to pay for private school or whether they don't have those means, that there are still great options for them. Is, you know, he is somebody that I deeply admire and look up to. And maybe the last one I'll close with is a sister named Jessie Woolley Wilson. She fellow UVA college basketball champs last season. Wahoo.
We're gonna let that go. We're gonna let that go.
A tech company called Dreambox. And Dreambox Learning runs I can't remember if it's a K-5 or a K-8 platform for math online that helps augment what teachers do in classrooms for kids. And so I think when a lot of people meet Jessie, they assume that because she runs a tech company that she is kind of techie first. And what she really is kid first. And she realizes that the technology is a way to reach kids and a way to help teach kids, and makes this not as something that's trying to replace teachers, but something that can augment and help teachers do their jobs better through the way it works with kids. And I deeply, deeply admire her and the way she carries herself on a day in and day out basis.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate it. I just want to make sure I got all the names. So we've got Tim King in Chicago, Charlene Reed in the Bronx, and then Howard Fuller for sure, and then Jessie Woolley Wilson. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love you have a good mix of people who are all doing great work, but kind of different kinds of work.
Yeah.
Which is great, which is awesome. I think, you know, the next question is education is something that everybody talks about. Sometimes it can be hard to know where to get the facts from, or hard to know, besides maybe, you know, some CNN headline of something that happened, some big policy decision. How do we stay abreast with what's going on, either locally or nationally or regionally? Where do you go for your information?
I mean, I think in a lot of markets, there is kind of some kind of regional trade rag that covers education exclusively. So in Memphis, there's a newspaper called Chalkbeat.
Yep, we got Chalkbeat. Yep.
In Chicago, there's a new journal called Catalyst. But find out, because there's a lot of macro conversations about education,
right,
but what really matters, like what's happening on the ground where you are. So find out, and you know, the easiest way sometimes is just to go to your local newspaper or go to your local NPR site, and they'll often have an article that wasn't written by the newspaper, but was written by the local ed rag that is reprinted in the newspaper. So that's always my kind of first recommendation for folks. I think there's a couple of national, there's a online news rag called the 74 for the 74 million students that are served. That is great. Education Week has a great kind of weekly blog and synopsis of what's going on. But those two kind of, as you're getting into it, they can get kind of overwhelming because there's just a lot of content out there that's covered on those. One of the things I always encourage people, if you want to know what's going on, go get involved in a school.
Right.
Figure out what are the opportunities after school, summertime, weekend, like how can you get involved deeply in a school? Because that's going to give you a perspective that's going to be so different than, you know, staying abreast at the 30,000 foot level of, you know, what did the current administration say that they want to do in their education budget? That matters importantly, but what matters more is, oh, I see that in my local community, kids don't have access to high quality summer programs. Right. So what can I do in my community to change that? Who can I talk to about that? How can I figure that out? You know, I think it is, it's easy to stay involved in education by just reading on the sidelines. But I would encourage people to actively get involved, you know, in any way you can, given the kind of constraints of your life.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. I think, you know, I think I spent most of my time, I studied public policy while I was an undergrad, and I was always interested in education. Basically, I didn't learn anything real about education until I actually started being with people. And you can learn just as much if you find a leader in your community who's doing dope stuff and follow them on social media. You'll learn everything that you know.
That's right.
You know, but you know, all of besides Chalk B74 are all
yeah, I'll give a shout out to there are 4 brothers who have a podcast called the 8 Black Hands.
8 Black Hands. Okay.
A brother from, you know, one's from New York, one's from Philly, one's from Oakland, and one's from Minneapolis. And you know, it's mainly education. There's some commentary on some other stuff.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
General stuff as well. But they're really, really, really passionate brothers who all have kind of different perspectives on this, but are centered around there's a crisis in our country in the education of, in particular for this podcast, Black kids in the country.
Right.
And so that's always something entertaining that I listen to on a weekly basis.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Okay, 8 Black Hands. I've heard, I think there's one podcast, I heard about it because Chris Emden, who wrote For White Folks Who Teach in the Hood, and the rest of y'all too, was on a podcast of, I think the name is something along the line of 3 Educated Brothers or something like that, but it's 3 guys.
Okay.
And that alone, just listening to some of those episodes, was not only cool to get the information, but also get it from somebody who's telling the story with some experience, but also in somebody who, like me personally, is a teacher and is a
that's right. That's right.
Dude who could relate to. So I think I don't want people to sleep on podcasts either. Podcasts can be an excellent place to hear not just information, but also stories and connect with experts in a way that's different.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
So that's awesome. That's all, like 8 Black Hands. I got to make sure I listen to that.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Very, very cool. With that, Darryl, I mean, I think if you have time, I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions, just what I was curious about, and then we can open it up to the folks who have joined us, or if there's anything else that you can think of to share. I think I'll start with I guess I'll start with your personal experience as a school leader, and you talked about how that was one of the most powerful and positive and negative ways for you. I guess I wanted to hear more about, maybe I'm being kind of selfish for the other folks online, but I wanted to hear about your experience, particularly as a Black male school leader. And obviously I work in an all boys school now, and being a Black male educator myself, not only do you know, there's obviously the Growth Fund know that we need more people who look like and represent our kids in front of our kids, but especially with the dudes, especially. The ladies have kind of been on it and kind of are on it, but fellas definitely got to step it up. So I just wanted to know, like, if you had any unique stories or experiences, or how your experience as a school leader might have been different because of your background and the identity you brought into your role.
Well, you're taking me back. I always pause when I go back to that time, because the young people that we were serving, they deserve so much. And at times we got them all that they deserve, but too many times we fell short of that. Given what many of them were bringing with them on a day in and day out basis, they were just incredibly resilient and beautiful young people. And so I think as a Black man who was in that situation, right, I could see in young people, kids who maybe weren't the best student or the top student, but I could see in them a strength and a power, given what they were facing every day, that I would have crumpled under had I had to face that at their age.
Yeah.
And so the question I always ask myself is, what are we doing to turn that into the asset that propels them to do great things,
right,
rather than looking at that as, you know, a deficit or, you know, oh, that's just what they have to do. No, that's a superpower.
Yeah,
That's
skill.
Many of our young people, like I would be, like I'd have been curled up in a corner, you know, not even making it every day. What, you know, a bunch of our kids had to face, and that's so real. So I think trying to ensure that the people around us have that asset mindset about our young people was one of the things for me that was super personal, important. I also think in the hiring process, ensuring that we had great folks of all different backgrounds, but in particular folks who looked like and understood and resonated with what was happening in front, what was happening in the lives of our kids, standing in front of our kids as an example of what could happen, what they could be and what they could achieve, was so important. And then the last thing I'll share is, you know, something that I don't think we got right when we were running the schools. There were so many entities and organizations who were set up to help the families and children that we were privileged to serve on a day in and day out basis. And we did not do a great job of organizing those into an accessible set of resources for our families. We should have been better at bringing in all of the assets and resources of the community to ensure that our families had what they needed. And, you know, when I look in the mirror, like I see that that's an area that we didn't provide enough. We did some, but it wasn't enough for what our kids needed. And I think in hindsight, we could have done a lot more.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing some of that, and it can definitely resonate with, you know, really all that you said. Definitely how, at least for me, teaching has definitely humbled me in a lot of ways of where I haven't seen grit in the same way that you see it with kids who are asked to perform at the same level as everybody else, but have so many different challenges. And that hustle is definitely an asset. And I'm glad that you articulated like that, and that you had people who were thinking of it like that way, and we could just translate it. You know, it can lead to some powerful things. And also think about what more we could do for our families as well. So I appreciate you sharing some of that. I think I just have hopefully time to just for one more question, and then we can kick it to whoever has joined us. Something I always get when I tell people where I teach is, you know, mainly what people know about charter schools is what they see on national debate headlines, and what they get. This one charter school is doing all these crazy things, and I guess how do you, like, what is your how do you handle that conversation that kind of happens nationally, especially with you know, politics, current administrations? You know, I guess we don't really know how to talk about school choice without, you know, conflating really what it is or what it means. How do you respond to people who are skeptical or anti-charter schools, and how do you articulate, you know, your purpose for still doing that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of different tactics